So Nvidia and AMD have both recently launched new reference graphics cards. We've got the Super series from Nvidia and the Navi RX 5700 series from AMD. We've taken a look at the reference cards, but now it's time for the third-party SKUs to start arriving. And first up is the MSI RTX 2060 Super Gaming X. Personally, I really want to see the Navi custom cards come in. The cooler there has a lot more room for improvement than the one that Nvidia has. I think Nvidia's partners might struggle to compete with the Founders Edition, because especially as that comes in at MSRP and is already a very solid product. However, it's much easier for Nvidia's board partners to get cards to market because they're pretty much just going to use existing designs with the refreshed Super branding. And on that note, we have the MSI RTX 20 Super Gaming X to look at. The gaming range from MSI is known for delivering its sort of premium air-cooled options. And the 2060 Super is using the smaller Twin Frozer 7 design, which MSI has also used on 2060 and 1660 Ti. This surprised us when we got the card because the 2060 Super is actually closer to 2070, where MSI's gaming designs use a larger dual-fan cooler. Looking at the specs, however, and the reasoning behind the smaller cooler starts to become clear. MSI has only put a 3% overclock on this card, which is a little bit disappointing. It's running a boost clock of 1695 MHz, and this can be increased to 1710 via software. At the moment, we don't really know how that's going to fit into the wider market. The board partners are being a bit cagey on what their clock speeds are going to be, but by the time we get to the end of the video, we should know more about whether this overclock is quite good or bad, or where it sits compared to everything else. But for now, it does seem a little low, and hopefully there's going to be cards that are pushing the 2060 Super higher than this one is. Now, with so little an overclock, the TDP hasn't actually changed from the reference, so we're still looking at a 175 watt TDP, and considering that MSI used this cooler on the 2060 Gaming Z, which is a 190 watt card, well, there's no reason for them to have gone for the larger cooler. Now, if we start to take a look at the card, we can see a single 8-pin connector along the top. That's going to give you up to 150 watts, and you get up to 75 watts along the PCI, so 225 watts total, plenty enough for the 175 watt TDP. So physically, the card holds up very well to inspection. It has a plastic shroud, and it's very rigid thanks to this anti-bending bracket we've got here. And then on the back, we have a really nice brushed finish on the metal backplate. MSI has also spruced it up a little bit with some RGB. You have 4 strips along the front and then 1 along the logo on the top edge. Most systems are going to be able to take this card pretty easily. It weighs in at less than 1 kilogram. It's under 250 millimeters long. It's slightly taller than normal, at about 1 to 8 millimeters. And you will need to watch out for the 8-pin connector because it is not indented, which means you've got to look out for the power plug coming out the top. Also note that it is slightly larger than a dual slot card, so it's going to take out 3 slots on your motherboard to use this card, and you'll also need to watch out for, when vertically mounting, that the card isn't too close to the window because it's going to really impede your airflow. Display outputs, we've got 3 display ports and 1 HDMI, pretty standard combination. You'll notice that the Founders Edition has DVI and Virtual Link, but these two are not really that relevant, so probably not a big deal for most users. And just like Nvidia's reference design, we're looking at a 2-fan cooler with air being exhausted out the top and bottom, so do make sure that your case exhaust airflow is capable of dealing with that. One thing MSI has that Nvidia doesn't is its fans feature a semi-passive mode, so when the card is below 60 degrees, they'll be completely off and totally silent. I also really like the fact that they've got nickel plating on all the copper parts. It gives it a really nice consistent color. And the last thing I want to talk about is the warranty, which stands at 3 years, and again, this is a match for Nvidia and above the 2 years that's offered as like a default. So jumping into the testing, the first thing we want to look at is the boosting behavior of the card. Now, in the default gaming mode, which is how it will run out of the box, we're looking at clock speeds in the region of 1845 to 1860 MHz, which is about 60 MHz than we saw on Nvidia's Founder Edition. Now, it does come across as power limited, but luckily it's not a thermally limited curve, so good news for the cooling there. I also mentioned that the card has a software-driven OC mode, which you can use via the Dragon Center software, but using this doesn't really change anything. It does put the memory up to 14.3 gigabits per second, but really it makes no difference to the core clock speed and is pretty pointless overall. We also found that you have to leave Dragon Center running for it to stick, so it would be better just to have these settings running out of the box or to make the mode more impactful. We also graphed the silent mode, which is running with lower clocks, and this does affect performance a little bit more, but it has no tangible impact on fan speed, so it is not well named. You can see in our 3D Mark time spy graph just how little difference the OC mode makes. So we recommend either leaving the software uninstalled and just running it as it comes, or doing a proper manual overclock yourself. Looking at some benchmark results, we know from our original review that 1080p performance on this GPU is excellent. So in Shadow of the Tomb Raider and The Division 2, for example, we see both games with around 100 FPS on average. It's going to make it a really good card if you have a high refresh rate 1080p monitor. 1440p is what we consider the sweet spot for this card, and again there's going to be a range of performance depending on the game, but in our toughest benchmark, Metro Exodus, we see a minimum of 32 FPS and an average of 52 FPS, so still nice and smooth. And in less tough games like Far Cry New Dawn, we see 70 FPS and 91 FPS for minimum and average, and so it's always going to be smooth at this resolution. Now, given the low overclock, we weren't expecting a great deal of extra performance, and indeed it comes out as only 2.5% faster than the Founders Edition, but it's still extra performance. Also, compared to a 2060 Founders Edition, you're looking at around 16% on average. The overclock that MSI has applied also allows the card to close the gap on the RX 5700 XT, which is now only 3% ahead on average. Now, as ever, when comparing AMD to Nvidia, this average figure does disguise differences between games. So Total War, for example, is a game that heavily favours Nvidia hardware, whereas Assassin's Creed seems to favour the AMD GPU. There are no surprises when it comes to power. It's completely in line with the Founders Edition and definitely more efficient than the RX 5700 XT, which has much higher consumption. Temperatures are also nice and low. A delta temperature of 46 degrees is great, but equally it's no improvement on the Founders Edition. Similarly, we notice that noise is not much improved. The card certainly isn't loud, but it is audible when it's under load. But the good thing is that the fans turn off very quickly once you exit a game, and again, this is something that the Founders Edition is not able to do. In terms of overclocking, you shouldn't read too much into the results that we get. It does depend a lot on the chip that you receive rather than the card itself. We managed to get 100 MHz extra on the core and 15.6 gigabits for a memory speed. This was giving us a boost speed of 1935 MHz or thereabouts, which to be honest is not great for a Turing GPU. It also comes across as power limited despite us applying the maximum power limit. So who knows, maybe with an extra power limit we'd be able to get a little bit more, but not with this card. Now, because this is quite a competitive launch, the pricing between AMD and Nvidia is liable to change. But at the time of filming, we've been able to nail MSI down to pricing of £450 plus or minus £20 on this card. And that leaves it somewhere between 12 and 24% extra above the Founders Edition MSRP. So what do you actually get for that? Well, with the overclock applied, you do get a clock speed advantage and a performance advantage, but it is a very low one. And given that we know now that this is going to be MSI's flagship 2060 supercard, that's not really an ideal position for it to be in. Originally, we thought MSI was not going to be alone in offering cards with pretty minimal overclocks. But I mean, we have literally just minutes ago received another 2060 Super, and out of the box, it's performing faster than this card could when we had manually overclocked it. So again, not the best sign. And we've also had Asus confirm that it's going to be shipping cards with up to 1860 MHz on the boost clock, which is substantially higher. Now, MSI does, of course, also have RGB lighting and semi-passive fan modes, both of which are, kind of cool, but it's not going to be alone in offering these as part of its high-end cards. So in short, the pricing for this card is pretty high, but the tangible benefits over the Founders Edition look to be few and far between. Now, based on what we've just seen from another partner, I can't help but feel that if MSI had based its 2060 Super design on a 2070 card from its stack, it might have been able to get more out of this GPU. But as it stands, the performance advantage it offers is really very slim. So that brings this review to a close. We're going to have some more 2060 Super cards coming out for review very soon, and hopefully some of those are going to be able to bring the fight to the Founders Edition more than this one from MSI has. It's also worth remembering that our primary buying advice in this section of the market is to wait and see what the custom variants of Navi bring to the table, because that's the cooler that really needs improving upon, and I really think the partners can give it a good go. So that's it from us. I hope you've enjoyed the review. Leave us any feedback in the comments, remember to subscribe, and we will see you next time.